Hey, thanks for stopping by. It is hot out there. It's relatively cool, 90 degrees, which for New York is turning out to be new normal. The last 5 years have been, basically New York is now becoming a subtropical region. Hopefully that'll cool down a bit, for summer next summer or next week. But in the meantime, I figured it's a good time to chat about how to make riding in the heat more comfortable. It's kind of like riding in the cold, but the reverse, and there's only so much you can do to take off clothes. So we'll go through the basics, and most people can survive and even thrive. First thing, sunscreen. Sunscreen. Sportier stuff maybe stays on longer. I hope it does. That's what I've been using. I find that really thick stuff is harder to rub in, so I don't use it as much, so I go a little thinner. At 15 here, but probably SPF 30 would be better. Sunburn is something you don't want. It definitely makes hot rides more comfortable, more uncomfortable. It makes hot rides more uncomfortable and takes longer to recover. So, first thing for hot days, sunscreen. Next thing, chamois cream. You're sweating a ton, you're pouring water all over yourself, the chamois is going to get soaked. That reduction in friction, a lot of sliding around, it can be really uncomfortable. So, good chamois cream is something to put on before you put on your shorts in these hot days. Okay, next, water bottles. Carrying water. If you're used to carrying one bottle, carry two. If you're used to carrying two, carry two larger capacity bottles. Some people talk about the insulated water bottles. I have two right here. Insulated bottles, in my experience, are a mixed bag. The insulation ends up taking up interior space in the bottle, reducing overall capacity, and I find the insulation doesn't really work all that long. If a bottle goes from frozen to, let's say, cool in an hour, you're extending it maybe a half hour, but that seems a little generous, at least for these bottles. So, anyway, so for the bottles, you should have some sort of potion in it. I have Clip Shot here. Generally, I find the less sweet, more salty beverages seem to go down better in the hot weather, but your experience may vary. Some people on that front believe in salt supplementation, particularly people who are salty sweaters. There's limited research on it. It seems so far that the limited research indicates that salt supplementation doesn't help with performance. It doesn't mean that you're going to retain more salt and then thus more water. But if you're interested, Osmo and a couple other companies have something called a preload that basically tastes kind of like sweat. It's a very salty drink. You're supposed to drink it before you go on a bike ride. Some people have tried salt tablets. These are tablites. I tried them. Can't say I noticed anything, but it was worth a shot. Some people find it upsets their stomach. Some people say it works. So now you've been warned. In terms of longer rides, eating, I find that savory bars, the heavier ones, like a traditional Cliff Bar, are less appetizing in the hot weather, so I go for the simpler foods, such as, let's see what I got here. Got Cliff Rope. It's supposed to be for kids, but there's no age limitation on it, so you can do that. Cliff Rope, Cliff Blocks. So anyways, chews I find a lot easier to deal with than I find bars in warm weather. I also work with gels or goos. Some people don't like these because when they're dehydrated, they feel that it secretes liquid from the rest of your body to help metabolize it. It's this osmolality thing. There's some truth to that in my experience. All the same, if I'm going to bring gels, I cut them with water and I put them in a big flask so I can drink the calories. For those who, and then when you're in the middle of the ride, you can bring along packets of your own drink mix, so that way you don't have to rely on Gatorade. Gatorade is usually too sweet and not quite salty enough for the hot days a lot of people experience. If you want something simpler, Noon and the others have tablets, single tablets you can drop in. There isn't much in the way of electrolytes or calories, but it's probably better than water. So that's the of dressing. Well, you got to go with what you got, obviously. And there are ways to maximize it, the benefit of whatever you have. All the same, there is summer clothing, and it has gotten ever lighter over the years. Here I have one of my summer jerseys. It has front panels that are super thin, super airy, nearly see-through. And unlike some other summer jerseys, it actually has a pretty solid back so you don't sunburn through the jersey. There are plenty of jerseys where you will sunburn through, so check that out before you purchase a jersey. And if it's too late, you put some sunscreen on, or have someone put some sunscreen on you before you go out. Some people believe in sleeves for the cold, for the heat. Generally, I find these are better in dry climates than wet climates. The sweat doesn't evaporate fast enough in super humid places. I also find that these are of limited value after they dry out. Like usually if I'm going to wear these, I put them on, I soak them, I go for a ride, I try to keep putting water on the sleeves so that I can have evaporative cooling, keeping my arms and hopefully the rest of my body cool. And sort of in that realm, cotton is generally a bad idea for exercise because when it gets wet, it stays wet longer than a lot of synthetics. But in hot weather, that's a good thing. So some people like cotton cycling caps. You can soak it with water or soak it with your sweat, put it on your head, and it works as a cooling feature until the hat dries out. So you can always do that. Same for a cotton bandana. But a couple things before we go. One, when you're refilling the water, or when you're filling water bottles, there's a temptation to freeze the bottles overnight. There's a problem with that for a couple reasons. One, you can't get your mix right. Two, the bottles expand. And by expanding, that creates a problem for putting the water bottles into the cage. And then when the frozen water bottle thaws, they generally pucker. Remember, ice expands. So once they pucker, it's harder for the bottle to stay in the cage. So I prefer just really cold water and ice. So once I've done that, have my mix before I go, I usually run my head under the sink. Put my shoulders, my arms. So I've taken my see-through jersey, made it a little more see-through. I know, wet t-shirt contest, but evaporative cooling works great. And as I ride, the water on my arms will dry off, making a feeling of cool. And I can go for a ride in peace, at least for an hour or so.